It's a powerful job.
Yeah,
It's
you,
yeah, you control. A lot of people don't realize the majority leader. We may change it, but the majority leader controls what comes to the floor and what doesn't.
Mhm.
Now there are ways you can bypass him, but in almost every case, one person can object, and of course he objects or she objects. But it's an enormously powerful position. I'm trying to change the rule so that regardless of who the majority leader is, if a senator can demonstrate that the senator has 60 votes,
Mhm.
which of course would bust a filibuster, then that senator has the right to bring that bill to the floor.
Mhm.
Because frankly, there are a number of bills we could pass tomorrow with 60 votes, but Chuck won't let them come to the floor. And it was the same way when McConnell was majority leader. It's just a lot of power.
From there, or do you want to?
At least 5 years.
Okay. You still have family up there or property or anything?
No, I still have a little property up there. My dad got his start in the building business when he came back from World War II. He bought a portion of the old Camp Van Dorn military base there, and lumber was scarce, and he started tearing down the barracks and selling the lumber. And after he made a little money, he and Mom and my older brother and I moved to Zachary because the schools were better.
Mhm.
But we still have a little land up there.
Um,
How do you know Centerville?
I was reading your bio, and I just thought, it's like, I'm not. You may be the only U.S. senator from Centerville.
Centerville is well. All my
found any others?
My colleagues from Mississippi kid me. You know, they say we've got 3 senators from Mississippi. I said, no, I was born there, but I'm Louisiana.
Okay.
Well, I wish I knew. I've been trying to get permanent reform and permanence to the program for 7 years. For my people, for our people in Louisiana, I think the biggest problem right now is homeowners insurance, but right behind it is flood. Here's the problem. It's seen by a lot of senators from states that don't have a flooding problem as being unnecessary. That means that not only is it an uphill climb to reform the program, but sometimes, like every time it's about to expire, it's an uphill climb to get it renewed. Our flood insurance program, as bad as it is going to expire at the end of September. I will get it renewed. Schumer will bring it to the floor. I've already talked to him. He will not dare let it expire. But if I didn't push him, it's probably not on his top 10 list. There are a lot of misconceptions about the program. For example, I fight every year with Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. Rand contends that our flood insurance just takes care of millionaires who are in multimillionaire beach houses and with subsidized insurance. And I tell Rand, I've had the debate with him on the Senate floor, that may be the case in some states, but our coast is a working coast. My people are working people. So the first fight we always have every 6 months to a year is getting it renewed. The second fight we always have, one I've been working on for 7 years, is reform. We had a setback with FEMA. FEMA administers the program. FEMA completely redid it. They came up with a new algorithm which they say can look into the future and predict the likelihood of your home, not your subdivision, not your region, but your home flooding. And so they set premiums accordingly. And my response to that when they rolled it out a couple of years ago, I said, that's amazing. I'd like to see this thing. And they said, we can't show you the algorithm. It's proprietary. And if we show it to you, we have to kill you. And I said, now look, okay, my mother didn't raise a fool, and if she did, it was one of my brothers. You have to explain to the American people and my people how this algorithm works. For example, does it give us credit in your premiums for our levies? They won't answer any of it. And so I sent them a Freedom of Information Act request. They denied it. I said, will you show it to me? They said, no, if you want to see it, you're going to have to sue us. So we did. And that's tied up in court. But they will not tell anyone how they set their premiums. And I think that has really set the program back. Longer term, what we need to do, and everybody says mitigation is the answer, and they're right, preventative work, but, that's the long-term solution. But in the long term, we're all dead. We need a program that is affordable for people and offers protection. It's just that simple. The program isn't big enough. We've got 5 million people nationwide. That's nothing. Long term, I would like to add to it, say, wildfire insurance or earthquake insurance. And as the climate does change, you see more and more people subject to flooding. As I tell some of my colleagues, look, I don't care if you're in the middle of Kansas. If you get 12 inches of rain in 2 hours, you're going to flood. You better have flood insurance. But what I would like to do is eventually expand the program to spread the risk. And if we can spread the risk, we can lower the premiums. But it's been the toughest issue that I have worked on because so many of my colleagues are just not committed to it. Well, the country's very divided. The country's evenly divided. You got 50% who say we ought to go one way and 50% who say we ought to go another. There's some overlap. I mean, but your middle, where people who are just left of center and just right of center, is getting smaller and smaller. People are very angry, and that's represented through their elected representatives. The inflation, and I know you don't want to get into whose fault it is, but it's undeniable that we're still going through the worst bout of inflation in 40 years. And inflation, the rate, thank goodness, thank the Federal Reserve's coming down, but all that means is that prices are rising less quickly. The prices themselves, when the inflation rate comes down, that's disinflation. Deflation is when the prices go down. We're not experiencing deflation, and we're not going to. These high prices are permanent. To give people relief, we've got to grow out of it. And we were doing okay there for a while, but now the labor market is starting to shrink and the economy is starting to slow, and that worries me. But my point is, it has made people very angry. That, regardless of how you feel about it, the border, some people think the border should be secure. I do. Other of my colleagues and many Americans think that we should have an open border, that vetting people at the border is racist. Crime is mixed in with it. And then you add to that the national security situation with respect to which we find ourselves, and it creates an enormous amount of anger. The Senate is still much better than the House. I mean, I love my friends in the House, but we're smaller in the Senate. We have to work together. I don't hate anybody. I know every one of my colleagues. Some I like better than others, but I like all of them. And I refuse to hate. I mean, once I start hating, it's time for me to find a new line of work. We made a lot of mistakes in COVID, but when President Biden took office, our economy, we were opening up and the economy was roaring. We were coming out of it, in part because all of us, Democrats and Republicans, had spent so much federal money. but we'd spent enough. We were coming out of it. The Biden-Harris administration decided, well, we need the American Rescue Plan. I forget the exact price, 1.2 trillion. And they said, we need it for COVID. Well, that wasn't true. The economists said, no, we don't. If you want to just do it because you want to add to the federal spending and add new programs under the thesis of you never let a crisis go to waste, that's one thing. But that was followed by the infrastructure bill, which was followed by the China bill, what I call the big tech bill, which was followed by the Inflation Reduction Act. And you had supply which was constant, and in some cases going down because of kinks in the supply chain. Most of those worked out. And then you had this enormous demand. You had inflation. And the Federal Reserve and Secretary Yellen were caught off guard. They thought it was transitory. I don't think they were lying. I think they really thought it was, but it wasn't. And with no help from Congress or President Biden and Vice President Harris, Jay Powell, I'm a big Jay Powell fan at Federal Reserve, he ratcheted the rates up. And I didn't think he could do it. I thought we'd have to go to 9 or 10% unemployment. He's done it with about 4.3. And inflation, I'm not going to say it's under control, but it's a lot better than it was. But I get calls every day from people saying, okay, you say inflation's now much better. How come prices aren't falling? These prices aren't going to fall unless we go into a recession. The prices right now are falling in China because they're in a recession. And I don't want us to go into a recession. That means unemployment of 6, 7, 8%. And that's my interpretation of it. Now, I've got colleagues that will tell you it's all greed of companies, and they'll say it's all supply chains. I just think they're wrong.
All right, well,
Inflation is pernicious.
okay. So they throw all the votes out.
It just guts the middle class like a fish. I mean, this is the impact on Louisiana. Our median household income, family of four, is between $15,500 and $60,000. You know, that's mom and dad both working, house note, 2-car notes. They got to eat. We calculate that the 20% inflation that we had from 2021 to today cost the average Louisiana family about $950 a month. That's $10,000 plus a year. Now, they received some stimulus checks, but they blew through those. They've maxed out their credit cards. They've rated their kids' college education fund, the 529 program, and they're really angry. And that will be, I don't care what the polls show, it is the biggest factor. It's not the only factor, but it will be the biggest factor in the elections in the House and the Senate and the presidency. I'm worried about the economy. I've watched the unemployment rate. We've gone from about 3.4 fairly quickly to 4.3. It could have been a lot worse. I'm a big Jay Powell fan. I pushed hard for President Biden to reappoint him. I did because I'm not saying Powell I sit on the banking committee. I'm not so we interface a lot. I'm not saying that he's perfect, but Senator Warren, who I'm friends with, she sits on the banking committee with me. Elizabeth has President Biden's ear. She didn't want Powell. I knew who she wanted. And I did not want who she wanted. I wanted Powell to be reappointed. And you got to give him credit. He's gotten this thing down. I did not think he could do it at less than 6, maybe 7% unemployment. But it still doesn't mean prices are going down. Just the rate of increase is going down. I think Americans I think we made two mistakes in terms of our elections. And I think this would fix the problem of people not having confidence in their elections. I think if I were king for a day, I'm not, I don't aspire to be, but I would have two rules. Number one, we need to go back to having an election day, not an election month. It's up to the states to decide how people can vote. If they want an early vote, if they want absentee, however they want to do it, that's up to the states. But we need a rule that the votes have to be counted by election night. No more waiting a month. No more waiting a month. The other rule that I would implement hard and fast is you have to be able to prove. We can debate what the proof is, but you have to be able to prove you are who you say you are in order to vote. If you do those two things, we'll be fine, and you will have people accept the results of an election. But the main thing is go back to having an election night. And people ask me all the time, hypothetical, you do, what about this and what about that? I don't know. My only prediction about the presidential race is that it's going to be very close. We've got two choices, Trump, Harris. A lot of people don't like Trump. A lot of people don't like Harris. You're not picking a spouse. You're not picking a partner. You're picking a president. There is no door number three. Presidential elections are about the future. But the future, if you think about it, is really just a bunch of things we do right now strung together. And I think the winner of this race will be the person who convinces the American people that they can do the most for them in terms of inflation, crime, the border, national security. The second prediction I'll make is these polls, you can throw them out the window. The last three cycles, the polling has been wrong. It's not the pollster's fault. Here's what I think is going on. 5 years ago, if people didn't want to answer a poll, they'd just hang up on the pollster or not take the call. Now you've got between 5 and 10% of people. They're angry on both sides. They take the call and they screw with the pollster. They just don't tell the truth. Now, if you've got, I've read plenty of polls in my life and the crosstabs that go with them. If you've got 5% in a carefully calibrated poll of people that are not going to tell you the truth just to screw with you, those polls are going to be off. The only thing a poll tells me today is a trend. And the only thing I can see in the last 6 weeks from the current poll is that clearly Vice President Harris is doing much better than President Biden. President Biden was going to get beat. But that has changed, and it will be a very, very, very close election. Most of my time is being spent in helping my Senate colleagues in the battleground states. The presidential race is above my pay grade. But I'm spending a lot of time in Ohio and Montana and Wisconsin and Michigan. Well, I'm pretty, look, God gave me the right to remain silent, but he didn't give me the ability. And I'm very frank. But when I'm not kidding you, when I say my prayers, I do. I ask God, don't let me just hate. Don't let me hate. And I try to get along with everybody, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to be candid. And I do. I like breakfast food and straight answers, and I want people to know where I stand. I try to vote like my people would want me to vote if they had the same information that I have, which they don't always have, particularly on national security. But yeah, I have people that like me and I have people that hate me. I get a lot of death threats. Some you take seriously, some you don't. We all do. We all travel now with police protection in airports. And I have people that stop me and say, great job. And I've had people stop me and say, Kennedy, you remind me of my second wife. Can't make everybody happy.
Did you get some more information about that?
Yeah,
That's an
really.
odd observation.
Oh, you wouldn't. I mean, but there's people entitled to their opinion. But I'm telling you, there's the right and the left have more in common than you realize. They're very angry. They really think the country's headed in the wrong direction on both sides.
Are you worried?
Sure. I'm an optimist who worries.
What do you worry about?
I worry about our institutions holding. 4 or 5 months ago, Schumer and I and 4 other senators were invited to come to China, meet with President Xi. He wanted to meet with us as sort of a preparation for his meeting with President Biden out in California. And of course, I went. We spent all day with him and his top people. They made it very clear in a nice way, but they're very frank people, that they think we're in decline. They believe that their way is the better way. People give up their civil liberties in return for the state protecting them. They don't have a democracy. Xi runs the place. He makes all the decisions on the economy, on retirement, on defense. They think that they will eventually have a much stronger military than we will. They think that we're silly in America. They think our institutions are flawed. They think that all we do is sit around and debate whether or not a man can breastfeed. And we don't take care of our business. They believe that. And now I don't agree with them completely, but it worries me that they think that. What you're seeing going on in the world today, without taking sides, but I've seen the intelligence. You have President Xi in China working with President Putin, working with the Ayatollah in Iran. They're in it together. Now, the quarterback is Xi. But their goal is to have Russia dominate Central and Eastern Europe. Their goal is to have Iran dominate the Middle East. And their goal is to have China dominate the Indo-Pacific, be free to roam in sub-Saharan Africa and South America. Now, I don't want America to be the world's policeman, but I don't want Xi to be the world's policeman either, or Putin. And that's just a fact. And all of my colleagues, whether they're for what's going on in the world or not in terms of America's involvement, that is a fact. And if I could show you the data, I can't, but if I could, you would see. Here's my experience with Trump. I know President Trump and I know Vice President Harris very well. I served with both of them. President Trump is what I would call a heterodox conservative. He's conservative, but some of his views aren't. He's very practical. He's a business person. He has no filter. That's not going to change. It just is what it is. He doesn't have a filter, and he doesn't want a filter. My experience with President Trump is that he could be reasoned with if you disagreed with him on a particular matter, like the economy. We had big, not fights, but big lively discussions, for example, when we were crafting the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Trump's not really an ideologue, as much as people think. He shook things up with NATO when he was first elected to office, but it had a good result. I mean, the truth is that if it were not for the American people, Putin would be in Paris right now. Europe wasn't spending any money on defense. They're doing a whole lot better. And they're not there yet, but they're doing a whole lot better, and it was in part because Trump really rattled things and then when he said, look, you need to start paying your share. I know the vice president very well. We served in the Senate together. We were on judiciary together. which is a very close-knit committee because we're together a lot. Kamala was easily the most left-wing senator. She was even to the left of Bernie and Elizabeth on a lot of things. I think she'll govern that way. I think in a presidential race, both sides want to try to move to the middle, and I get all that. I've run campaigns. But I think I know what the bedrock principles of each of them are and how they'll govern. When I was in state government, I went through many reapportionments at the state level and at the federal level. And you see the worst in people, you know. I know many people in Washington, D.C. that they would unplug your life support to charge their cell phone. That's generally not the case in Louisiana, except during reapportionment. So I stayed out of it. I mean, I think Garrett is a really, really talented guy. I think he's whip smart. He works very hard. But he also made a lot of people mad. And at the end of the day, part of this business is a relationship business. Now, Garrett has another side of the story. I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I'll miss him. But nobody's, you know, we're all replaceable. And I think ultimately, when you look at the demographics, we were going to have a change in terms of majority, minority on the basis of race. It was just a matter of time. Now, did they have to draw the district the way they did it? No, but it's a weird-looking district that they drew, but I've seen weirder-looking ones. I mean, I've seen some that you just go, my God. You know, you put this thing together with vodka and darts. At least this one has some compactness. So we'll see. I'll work with whoever's elected. Somebody was going to get the short straw. It was just a question of which one. As particularly when the legislature decided not to fight anymore and the governor decided not to fight anymore for whatever reason, in terms of contesting the fact that we needed to draw a district to help elect a minority congressperson.